Pine Belt. Of course, it's been a nice weekend, although it's been definitely a hair on the warm side, if you will. But if you're a fan of the warmer temperatures, then enjoy it while we've got it, because before you know it, we will get a cool off. And of course, if you're missing the rain, well, we've still got a little ways to go for that, but eventually we'll see more rain. It just won't be summer-like rain anymore. It'll be more of those cold fronts, but we're not quite in that season yet either. Now, let's take a look at William Carey University, right? You notice that they are at 78 degrees and falling as of this time. And of course, like I said, no measured rain for anybody at any of our locations. But if you stepped outside today and you notice, hey, there was a few clouds that actually showed up during the course of the afternoon, and they were gliding along with that westerly breeze. And that westerly breeze and some of the clouds are all just kind of what's left over, the small little tatters and remnants of what was formerly Hurricane Helene. Once again, it's no threat to anybody or anything here in the Pine Belt, or anybody for that matter. It's just some lingering clouds from what's left of what's known as that low pressure center. Now, anyway, let's take a look at the temperatures across the board, right? You notice a few of those low 70s already getting a start. Taylorsville at 70 on the dot. Some of those other lower 70s populating on the map. 72 in Laurel, 74 in Jefferson Davis County and Prentiss. And then, of course, as we make our way down to areas like Perry County, right? You see New Augusta there at 78. And, of course, maybe even some of those warmer temperatures indicating maybe a few upper 70s, maybe even an 80 for those of you if you happen to be somewhere immediately southeast of Metro Hattiesburg. Maybe you just might be clinging to 80 degrees. But other than that, like I said, we're going to continue to see that cool off throughout the evening, and it's actually going to make for a nice, comfortable evening here in the Pine Belt, that's for sure. I love overnights where it's in the 50s and the 60s. It doesn't get any better than that, especially with the lower humidity, and it's perfect. But anyway, let's talk about the tropics, right? Now, the tropics, remember, I know that typically we think of most hurricanes being kind of an August thing, a September thing, but you say, well, hey, Nick, aren't we reaching the end of September? Yes, I know we're reaching the end of September, but hurricane season does continue until the end of November. Now, basically, this means that we still have an area that we're going to be watching, our next area, in terms of, just kind of looking into what it's going to be doing. Because basically, if you look ever so carefully down in the Caribbean, you can see we've got a weak cluster of showers and thunderstorms that's attempting to kind of shape up. And it's going to be monitored carefully as it kind of evolves, because currently, and this hasn't changed much since yesterday, but currently it's still got about a 50-50 shot of further development of becoming a tropical depression within the next 7 days. But either way, as it makes its way northwestward, right, there's a lot of factors at play here. If this tropical system or future tropical system kind of makes its way northwestward and avoids a lot of land masses, then it could end up being a bit stronger, since typically tropical systems, they like being over the water where they can get moisture and energy and other things like that. But if it interacts more with the Yucatan Peninsula or the tip of Cuba here, the western tip of Cuba, then maybe it'll keep it a bit weaker. But a lot of things just kind of remain unknown, and that's how it goes for long-term forecasting, is that there's always unknowns, some of them sometimes more than others. But since we have some of those unknowns, we are just going to have to wait for it to get more materialized, shape up a bit more, and once it does so, then we'll have some better information to go off of and be able to forecast from there. Now, I will say that as it moves northwestward, regardless of where it ends up, Straits of Yucatan, Cuba, the Gulf, whatever it might be, basically it is expected to enter a reasonably more favorable environment, and that's when we'll see some of the more materialization, some of the upgrading take place, if I had to guess. But that still is several days out. Now, let's talk about Isaac, right? You can see Isaac really kind of struggling to cling to life, at least as a tropical system. And here's where I'm going with this, right? Isaac has made its way so far north in the Atlantic that soon enough, you can see these icons indicating, you see the little white-faced font with the red there. I know that technically we say, Nick, isn't a tropical storm 40 miles an hour or above? And yes, you would be correct. However, you need a tropical storm to actually be in tropical waters. And sooner or later, if a tropical system or a tropical storm, a hurricane, whatever it may be, moves far enough north, it can no longer be considered tropical in nature. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Tropical Storm Isaac for now. It'll eventually become post-tropical or extratropical Isaac there. But other than that, Isaac's not much of a factor for anybody. It's just going to kind of continue to churn out in the North Atlantic and see even several days out, still no factor to land. And of course, it'll continue to slowly weaken as it makes its way into much cooler waters as well. Now, we have a kind of a two for one here on this graphic, right? And we were talking about Joyce. Joyce, you can see ever so slightly, there's just a little speck of Joyce that's left. It has already become Tropical Depression Joyce, and it's just going to kind of continue to fizzle out, fade into obscurity in the middle of the Atlantic, and that will be all we hear from Joyce for this year. However, this is what we're looking at for our next system. Now, the next name on the list is Kirk, and then after that we've got Leslie. And if I had to guess, since this system right here, south and west of the Cape Verde Islands off of Africa, if I had to guess, this will likely be Kirk, and that disturbance we're watching out in the Gulf, if it were to become more materialized, more composed, it would become Leslie. So here is future Kirk. You can see that we're already expecting it to become a tropical depression sometime, maybe during the overnight, and probably more likely at some point during tomorrow, as outlined by the National Hurricane Center. And you notice that future Kirk is expected to remain well out in the Atlantic, away from land. However, if you notice, it's forecasted to become a hurricane, possibly even a major hurricane at that. And I mean, when it comes to the Atlantic Ocean, right, you're far away from any sort of land interaction. Typically, these hurricanes have a lot of energy, a lot of favorable conditions to work with, as long as there's not enough what's called wind shear kind of ripping these storms apart. And as long as that hurricane kryptonite isn't there, then it'll just continue to materialize, bubble up, and we will expect this system to become more composed throughout the next several days. Now, other than that, that is a wrap on the tropics. I know that was a mouthful. I know that was a lot, but anyway, we're good. The hard part's done. Whew. There you go. Okay, so let's take a look at the almanac for today. You notice that we've been reaching the high 80s for the duration of the last few days, and we're going to see a lot more of those high 80s in the near term. And so basically that is warmer than average by a few degrees here. Typically we're about 84, 85 degrees for late September this time of year in the Pine Belt. But you notice that record high there of 99 degrees in 1911. Man, pretty crazy when you think about it. But the biggest thing I want to draw your attention to, and if you joined me at 5 o'clock today, I was talking about how we're basically done for rainfall for the month of September. I know you say, oh, well, we got the 30th, but I would be surprised, very surprised at that. We're more than likely done with our rainfall tally for September of 2024. And you see that that puts us at a little under an inch where we should have been so far for the month. So something to keep in mind there, because that ever so small margin, you see that we're barely above where we should be for the year so far, but that's through August 31st. Once we hit the end of the month, you notice that we will be entering a deficit so far for rainfall for where we should be so far for the year. Anyway, all right, let's talk about the overnight, right? A lot of those mid-70s, maybe even lower 70s, depending on where you are right now. In fact, I remember Taylorsville was at 70, so you're going to have a quicker start to your cool-off than this. But generally speaking, a lot of us are going to be in the low to mid-70s at this time. And we're going to see that nice cool-off throughout the duration of the evening there. And of course, we'll be bottoming out somewhere around 63, 64 degrees for tonight under mostly clear skies. There won't be a whole lot of moon. I know there's a moon here, but there's more moon here than there probably is in the sky, especially just because you got some of those clouds, but also because our moon phase, I believe if we might have a slight little sliver of a crescent left, but I think that waning crescent is just about done. It's about to hit a new moon, if it hasn't already. Step outside. I'm actually curious. I'll have to step outside when I'm done with my 10 o'clock newscast, then we'll know. But anyway, let's take a look at your lows for tonight. You notice a lot of 64s, 66s all seem to be a favorite, maybe even a stray 68 there like at Wiggins. But other than that, mid-60s, nice, pleasant, comfortable for the overnight hours before we warm up once again for tomorrow. I'd be looking for partly cloudy skies again tomorrow, and then a lot of those upper 80s. You see 85 in So-So, 87 in Moselle here at the station, and 88 over there and close to the Leaf River in Beaumont. So any way you take it, a lot of those 80s will be the name of the game. You never know. A few locations also trying to hint at maybe an 89. If you're heading west on the 98, like into Marion and Walthall, maybe even out towards Macomb, those sorts of areas, Pike County, maybe you'll hit a very rogue 90 for a very brief period. You never know. If these areas get a little more sunshine for an extended period longer than some of the other areas, then maybe it'll warm you up just a hair. So you have keep that in mind. Your car thermometers, as long as you get enough airflow and you're driving at speed and give it a few moments for that thermometer to calibrate, if you see a 90, then you'll hit a brief 90 for a brief period. You never know, right? There's always a variation when it comes to temperature relative to a region. And this is exactly what we're seeing for the overnight for Tuesday morning. Now, of course, it's going to be very similar. A lot of 64s, 66s, the name of the game. And then, of course, maybe a few 68s down in the extreme southern portion of the viewing area. Now, let's talk about Tuesday, right? Taco Tuesday, if you will. Of course, it's going to be very similar, but you can see that this particular model is trying to indicate maybe a rogue 90 like Loosedale, so you never know, right? We could see a few rogue 90s show up in a few communities as soon as maybe even tomorrow or Tuesday and maybe even Wednesday. Wednesday is looking to be a warm day, an above average day as well. Speaking of the heat, well, I know that thankfully the humidity isn't as bad as the summer, but it's still going to be sticky for the better part of the upcoming days. You notice that basically the mid-60s are going to be the name of the game for most of the days, and thankfully it's not. It could be worse, right? It really could be, but I know that you see the greatest humidity is there on Friday, just in time for the Friday night lights. So if you're spending time at the football field watching football games, you might be feeling a little bit of that humidity, but it's also due in part because we have small, and I mean tiny little rain chances showing up there. And again, this has to do with some of the uncertainties that we're talking about, but also because we're in a time of the year where even if we do get a cold front that happens to pass through the area, it's pretty much a cold front name only. Maybe it'll knock the temperatures just a few degrees cooler, as you see on the 7-day forecast. Maybe it'll bring a few clouds or a few rogue showers in the area, but typically the cold fronts aren't very pronounced if they even make it to our area at all. And that remains to be seen on our forecast as well, whether or not the cold front kind of sweeps through and makes a name for itself, or speaking of making its name for itself, maybe if the tropics, with them staying active, we'll be watching that very carefully to see what that system in the Caribbean does, because it will influence how much moisture we get, the muggy meter, and of course the rain chances as well. But other than that, though, it's looking like a nice week, and I'm looking forward to that slight cool off. That will be a nice thing to look forward to there, because other than that, it's going to be a fairly dry, not only finish to September, but a fairly dry start to our October as well. Have a great night, y'all. I hope you have a wonderful week. I know it's coming up and you're like, oh man, it's Monday, but look, I know, I get it, I do, but just enjoy your week, and I'll see you again some point soon.